The Chesapeake and Ohio Railway did not intend to become the owner of the Greenbrier. It happened in 1910 when the C&O acquired the existing White Sulphur Springs resort property in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, as part of a strategy to generate passenger traffic on its rail lines. And it happened in the sense that a railroad buying a resort hotel to fill its passenger cars is not a hospitality company making a hospitality investment. It is a transportation company that has accidentally acquired one of the most significant destination resort properties in American history as a byproduct of its core business objective. The Greenbrier opened in 1778. It has served as a destination for American presidents, European royalty, and the domestic establishment since before the American Republic was a decade old. By 1910, when the C&O acquired it, the Greenbrier had already been operating for 132 years. It would operate for another 113 years before this episode was produced. The specific forensic interest of the Greenbrier case is not merely the longevity, which is extraordinary, it is the accidental ownership mechanism. A transportation company that became the steward of a destination resort, not through a hospitality strategy, but through a passenger revenue strategy, and that maintained that stewardship across decades of railroad industry contraction, bankruptcy, corporate restructuring, and eventual divestiture, producing an ownership history that is the precise opposite of the deliberate leverage buyout transactions this channel has documented across its archive. Every hotel in this channel's archive that has failed was acquired deliberately, at premium prices, by sophisticated investors who had analyzed the acquisition extensively before committing capital. The Greenbrier was acquired accidentally by a railroad that was trying to fill its passenger cars. Subscribe now, because the ownership mechanism is the forensic story this episode tells. The Chesapeake and Ohio Railway's acquisition of the Greenbrier reflected the specific logic of railroad passenger service economics in the early 20th century. The railroad's revenue depended not only on freight tonnage, but on passenger car utilization, and passenger car utilization in the resort corridor depended substantially on having a destination that justified the journey from the eastern seaboard cities the railroad served. White Sulphur Springs had been that destination since the 18th century. The natural mineral springs that the original resort had been built around had drawn visitors from Virginia, the Carolinas, and eventually from across the eastern seaboard for more than a century before the C&O's acquisition. The Greenbrier's white-columned main building, its cottages, its formal gardens, and its social traditions had made White Sulphur Springs a destination whose cultural significance to the Southern American establishment was comparable to the significance that Newport, Rhode Island, had for the Northern establishment. The C&O's investment in the Greenbrier was therefore not a departure from its core business. It was an extension of it. Owning the destination that filled the trains was the most direct available investment in the passenger traffic the trains needed. This specific logic produced a specific ownership characteristic that distinguished C&O's relationship with the Greenbrier from every private equity or institutional hospitality investment this channel has documented. The railroad's return on its Greenbrier investment was not measured in hotel operating returns, but in passenger revenue, which meant the hotel's financial performance was always evaluated against a combined transportation and hospitality revenue calculation rather than against standalone hotel operating metrics. A hotel whose owner measures its success by the passenger cars it fills is a fundamentally different hotel investment from a hotel whose owner measures its success by its RevPAR relative to its debt service coverage ratio. The former creates structural incentives for investment in guest experience and destination maintenance that the latter systematically undermines through debt service constraints. The Greenbrier benefited from the former incentive structure for 6 decades under C&O ownership, and it shows. The Greenbrier's physical development under C&O ownership documented the specific investment pattern that the railroad's combined transportation hospitality revenue model produced, a series of capital investments in the resort's physical plant that were calibrated to the destination's continued attractiveness as a reason to board a C&O passenger train rather than to the return on the specific investment in the hotel facility itself. The most significant of those investments was the construction of the current main building, designed by Dorothy Draper in a style that has become one of the most recognized interior design statements in American hospitality history. A bold, maximalist application of greens, pinks, and whites, whose specific aesthetic language made the Greenbrier visually unmistakable in an era when most American resort hotels were pursuing understated elegance. The Dorothy Draper renovation of 1948, funded by C&O at a scale that reflected the railroad's assessment of the destination's continued competitive importance rather than the hotel's standalone return on renovation investment, produced the physical and visual identity that the Greenbrier has maintained as its primary brand asset across the subsequent 7 decades. That investment decision illustrates the core thesis of this case file. When the owner's return calculation includes the passenger revenue that a destination resort generates for its rail lines, the renovation investment decision is made on a broader revenue basis than standalone hotel economics would support. The C&O renovated the Greenbrier in 1948, not because the hotel's own financial returns would justify the renovation cost, but because the railroad's combined transportation-hospitality revenue model made the renovation necessary to maintain the destination's competitive draw. A private equity hotel owner in 2024 would not make that calculation. Its return calculation is limited to hotel operating metrics. The renovation investment that a transportation company makes to maintain a destination resort's competitive draw is invisible to a hotel operating model that does not include the transportation revenue the destination generates. This invisible return is the specific financial mechanism that has historically produced underinvestment in trophy resort properties under conventional hospitality ownership, and that C&O's accidental ownership model inadvertently avoided. The Greenbrier's Cold War chapter adds a dimension that no other case file in this channel's archive contains. The United States government's secret construction, beginning in 1958, of a congressional relocation bunker beneath the Greenbrier's West Virginia wing, a facility designed to house the entire United States Congress in the event of a nuclear attack and that operated covertly for 32 years before its existence was reported by the Washington Post in 1992. The bunker's existence was known to a small number of C&O executives whose cooperation was required for its construction and maintenance, and to the government employees who maintained it under the cover of a private company providing telecommunication services to the Greenbrier. The resort's guests were unaware of it. The resort staff, with limited exceptions, were unaware of it. The Greenbrier's ownership history after the bunker's declassification followed a trajectory that was not typical of a destination resort whose prior ownership had been a railroad. The CSX Corporation, successor to the C&O, sold the Greenbrier in 2009 to Jim Justice, a West Virginia billionaire whose agricultural, coal, and resort business interests made him a natural buyer for a West Virginia landmark property. Justice subsequently faced a financial restructuring whose complexity extended across his Greenbrier ownership, producing a period of uncertainty about the property's long-term stability that resolved without a change in ownership. The Greenbrier today operates under the ownership structure that the Justice family acquisition established, having survived the specific financial pressures of that ownership transition in a way that reflects the property's enduring position as a West Virginia institutional landmark whose civic and social significance creates the same category of structural resilience that this channel has documented in the Breakers and the Broadmoor cases. The railroad that accidentally acquired it in 1910 is gone. The Greenbrier opened in 1778 and is still there. The accidental owners lasted 99 years. The deliberate owners are still figuring it out. This content was developed using artificial intelligence tools as part of the research, writing, and production process. All AI-generated material was subject to human review, editorial intervention, and approval before publication.